I was standing at the kitchen sink, washing a single coffee mug, when my son called. Not to ask how I was doing. Not to say he was thinking about me. He called because he needed money. Again, I didn't answer. I set the mug on the drying rack, dried my hands slowly with the dish towel, and watched the phone screen go dark. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the backyard, the old oak tree, the garden my wife had planted 20 years ago before she passed, the wooden bench I built with my own hands when my son was 7 years old and used to follow me everywhere with a toy hammer. I thought about that boy. Then I thought about the man he had become. And I made a decision I had been quietly preparing for the last 3 months. Let me tell you something about myself that most people who know me would never guess. My name is Gerald. I'm 63 years old. I drive a 2009 Ford pickup with a cracked side mirror that I keep meaning to fix. I wear the same 3 flannels on rotation. I eat breakfast at the same diner on Tuesdays and Thursdays, black coffee, 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast. The waitress there, a young woman named Patrice, once told me I reminded her of her grandfather. I took that as a compliment. What Patrice does not know, and what very few people know, is that I own the building her diner is in. I own 11 other commercial properties in this city. I own a logistics company with 42 employees that I built from the ground up, starting with 1 truck and a storage unit when I was 26 years old. My accountant told me last April that my net worth had crossed 8 figures. I told him to make sure our quarterly employee bonuses went out on time and hung up. I am not telling you this to brag. I am telling you this because it is the only way the rest of this story makes any sense. My son, my only child, 34 years old, his name is Derek, has known for most of his adult life that his father is comfortable. That is the word he used once when he was talking to his girlfriend on the phone and didn't realize I was in the next room. My dad is comfortable, he said. Like I was a sofa. Like everything I had built was just background furniture in the story of his life. Derek does not work. He has not held a steady job in 4 years. He had a position at a marketing firm that I quietly arranged through a business associate. He lasted 7 months before they let him go for showing up late consistently and missing deadlines. He told me the company had culture problems. I did not argue with him. What I did was continue paying for his apartment on the east side of the city. 1,200 square feet, granite countertops, a gym in the building. I paid the rent directly. I had been doing it for 2 years. I also paid for his car, a lease on a vehicle that cost more per month than my first apartment did in 1987. I gave him a monthly allowance that I am embarrassed to say out loud because the number is not small. I did this because he was my son, because his mother died when he was 19 and I watched something close in him during those years, and I blamed myself for not being present enough when he was growing up, too busy building the business, too many late nights and early mornings. I was trying to make up for something. I see that clearly now. What I did not see clearly, until one specific evening in March, was that I was not helping my son. I was financing his contempt for me. It was a Saturday. Derek called and asked me to dinner, his idea, which was unusual enough that I noticed it. He named a restaurant downtown, the kind of place with no prices on the menu and a host who looks at your clothes before he looks at your face. I wore my good jacket. I got a haircut that morning. I drove downtown and paid $12 for parking and walked in feeling something I had not felt in a while. Hope, I think. That is what it was. Derek was already there when I arrived. He was not alone. Sitting across from him was a young man I had never met. Late 20s, expensive watch. The kind of easy confidence that comes from never having had to worry about anything. And next to Derek was his girlfriend, Melissa, who gave me the kind of smile that does not reach the eyes. I had met Melissa 4 times. Each time she had been perfectly polite and perfectly cold in the way that certain people are when they have decided you are not worth the full performance. "Dad," Derek said. "This is Brandon, Melissa's brother." We shook hands. Brandon had a firm handshake and immediately began talking about a real estate investment he was involved in, the way young men sometimes do when they want to establish something quickly. I listened. I asked a polite question or two. The food came. It was about 40 minutes into the dinner when it happened. Brandon was talking about his father, some story about a trip they had taken together to Portugal. A villa. A private driver. He was not being cruel. He was just talking the way people talk when their whole life has been a certain kind of easy. Then he looked at Derek and said, "You should bring your dad sometime. Does he travel much?" Derek laughed. It was not a warm laugh. "My dad?" he said. He glanced at me, then back at Brandon, and I saw something pass across his face, something that had been living under the surface for a long time. My dad's idea of a vacation is a fishing trip 2 hours outside the city. He still drives a truck from 15 years ago. He smiled and shook his head slowly. He's done all right for himself, I guess. But he paused, and I knew the sentence was going somewhere before he finished it. Brandon's dad built something. Mine just kind of coasted. The table went quiet. Melissa looked down at her plate. Brandon had the decency to look uncomfortable. I looked at my son. He met my eyes for exactly 2 seconds, then looked away and reached for his glass. I did not say a word. I picked up my fork. I finished my meal. I laughed at one of Brandon's jokes a few minutes later because it was actually a little funny. When the bill came, I paid it, all of it, without a word. I shook Brandon's hand on the way out. I told Melissa it was nice to meet her properly. I hugged my son, and I felt him stiffen slightly the way he always did now, like we were acquaintances who had once been close. I drove home in my 2009 Ford pickup with the cracked mirror. I sat in my driveway for a while. Then I went inside and called my attorney. I want to be clear about something. I did not make my decision out of anger. Anger is hot and fast, and it burns out. What I felt sitting in that driveway was something much quieter. It was clarity. It was the particular stillness that comes when you have finally stopped lying to yourself about something you have known for a long time. My son did not respect me. He had not respected me in years, and I, out of guilt, out of grief, out of some idea I had about what a father was supposed to do, had been paying for that disrespect. Month after month, with a direct deposit and a car lease and a doorman building on the east side of the city, I had been funding the very comfort from which he looked down on me. That was going to stop. But I was not going to do it the way a wounded man does it, shouting, threatening, making a scene. I was not going to give him a speech. I was not going to ask for an apology. I was simply going to stop. And I was going to do it carefully, completely, and quietly. My attorney's name is Patricia. She has worked with me for 19 years. When I told her what I wanted to do, she was quiet for a moment and then said, "Gerald, are you sure?" I told her I had never been more sure of anything since the day I signed the papers on my first property. She said, "All right then, let's be careful about the sequence." We were careful about the sequence. The apartment lease was in my name. I was the leaseholder. Derek was an occupant. Patricia confirmed that under the terms of the lease agreement, I could provide notice and transition the lease responsibility without any legal complication. I gave 60 days notice to the property management company. The car was simpler. The lease was mine. I called the dealership on a Monday morning and arranged for the vehicle to be returned at the end of the current billing cycle. 3 weeks away. The monthly bank transfer, the allowance I left in place for now. That would be the last to stop. I wanted the sequence to have a certain logic. I wanted my son to feel each thing separately, not as an explosion, as a series of quiet, deliberate doors closing. I did not call Derek to tell him any of this. I went about my week. I had breakfast at the diner on Tuesday. I attended a meeting with 2 of my property managers on Wednesday. On Thursday, I got a call from my logistics company's operations director with a question about a new contract, and we sorted it out in 20 minutes. On Friday, I took a long drive out past the edge of the city to a piece of land I had been considering purchasing, walked the perimeter in my boots, looked at the tree line, and decided it was worth pursuing. My life, as it had always been, continued. The first call from Derek came on a Wednesday, about 2.5 weeks after the dinner. He had received a notice from the property management company, routine communication just informing him that the lease structure was being transitioned and that he would need to either assume the lease in his own name or make arrangements. Dad. His voice on the phone was tight. What is this? Did you know about this? I did, I said. Silence. What does that mean? Are you taking the apartment away? The lease is transitioning, I said. You're welcome to take it over in your own name. The management company will send you the paperwork. Do you know how much that apartment costs per month? I do, I said. I've been paying it. Another silence. Longer this time. Dad, I don't have that kind of income right now. You know that. I'm between things. You've been between things for a while, son. I heard him exhale. Not quite a sigh. Something more frustrated than that. Is this about the dinner? Is this because of what I said? I let the question sit for a moment before I answered. I think it's time you stood on your own, I said. That's all. He started to say something else, and I told him I had to get to a meeting, which was true. And I said goodbye and hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment. Then I went to my meeting. The car situation resolved itself 2 weeks after that. The dealership collected the vehicle on a Thursday morning. Derek called me that afternoon. This call was different. The tightness in his voice from the first call had shifted into something rawer. Dad. They took the car. The lease ended, I said. I had stuff in there. Personal stuff. You can contact the dealership. They'll have a process for personal belongings. He stopped. I heard him breathing. This is unbelievable. I don't have a car, Dad. I don't have a way to get around. There's public transportation, I said. And ride shares. You're serious? I am. Another pause. Then his voice went somewhere different somewhere. I had not heard from him in a very long time. Something younger and less defended. Dad, are you trying to punish me? I thought about the dinner. I thought about the way he looked at Brandon and then away from me. I thought about the word coasted. I'm trying to give you something I should have given you a long time ago, I said. What's that? A reason. He didn't respond to that. After a moment I asked if he needed anything else and he said no, and we hung up. Melissa called me. I had not expected that. She called on a Sunday morning, and I almost didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number. But something made me pick up. Mr. Gerald, she said, I hope you don't mind me calling. Her voice was careful, controlled. But underneath it, I could hear something working hard. Not at all, I said. I wanted to talk to you about Derek. He's really struggling, and I'm worried about him. A pause. I think maybe there's been a misunderstanding. What's the misunderstanding? I asked. She was quiet for a moment, as if she had prepared for a different question. He didn't mean what he said the way it sounded, she said. At dinner. He was just Brandon can be a lot, you know. And Derek gets he gets insecure. He didn't mean you hadn't accomplished anything. I listened to all of this very patiently. I appreciate you calling, Melissa, I said when she finished. So you're not really going to. I love my son very much, I said. Everything I'm doing because I love him. She tried once more, and I let her try, and then I said goodbye. I did not feel good about that call. I did not feel bad about it either. I felt certain. That is different from both. The monthly transfer, the last piece, I stopped on the 1st of the following month. No drama. No announcement. I simply did not initiate it. By the 4th of the month, Derek would have noticed. He noticed on the 3rd. He showed up at my house. I saw his rideshare pull up through the kitchen window, and I watched him walk up the path, hands in his jacket pockets, jaw set. The walk of a man who has decided to be angry. I met him at the door before he could knock. He looked different. He had lost some of the easy softness that had settled in his face over the years of comfortable inactivity. There were shadows under his eyes. His jacket was the same expensive one he always wore, but it looked less like an accessory now and more like a habit. Can I come in? He said. Of course, I said. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had done his homework as a kid, where his mother had served Sunday dinners, where I had sat across from him 100 times and tried to find the right words for things. He looked around the kitchen for a moment. I watched him register the smallness of the house, The ordinary countertops, the dish drying rack, the same linoleum floor I had been meaning to replace for 8 years. I had always lived simply. He had simply never had to. "Dad," he said, "I need you to talk to me. Tell me what's happening. I think you know what's happening. I need to hear you say it." I looked at my son, 34 years old, my wife's eyes, my father's chin, sitting across from me at the table where he had once been 7 years old and trusted me completely. "I spent a long time trying to give you what I never had," I said. "I thought that was love. I think maybe it was guilt. And I think the result is that you have spent your adult life not having to build anything, not having to fight for anything. And somewhere along the way, you started to believe that this was because you didn't need to, that you were just," I chose my next word carefully, "above it." He was very still. "That's not fair," he said. "At dinner," I said, "you told a man you had just met that your father coasted. You said it while I was sitting next to you. While I was about to pay the bill for a meal I drove 40 minutes to attend because I thought maybe we were having a moment. Maybe things were turning around." I paused. I didn't say anything at the table because I was not going to perform my pain for an audience. "But I heard you, Derek. I heard you." The kitchen was very quiet. He looked at the table. "I was showing off," he said finally. He's a lot." And I felt. He stopped. Started again. "I felt small." "I know," I said. "So I made you smaller." He said it himself. I had not been prepared for that. "Yes," I said. He was quiet for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were wet, which I had not seen since his mother's funeral. And even then, he had turned away. "Dad, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to. I don't have savings. I don't have a job. I don't have a car. I barely know how to." He stopped. "I'm 34 years old, and I don't know how to do anything." This was the moment I had been both dreading and waiting for. The moment the performance falls away, and the real thing underneath becomes visible. "I know," I said, "and that is partly my fault. I made it too easy. I made it so you never had to discover what you were capable of. So what do I do now?" "You find out," I said. "I did not leave my son with nothing. I want to be honest about that. What I did not do was restore what I had removed. The apartment, the car, the monthly transfer, those did not come back. A man learns to swim when the water is real. What I did do, quietly and without announcement, was call a business associate of mine who runs a mid-sized distribution operation on the south side. I told him I had a young man who needed a real starting point, not a favor, not a gift, a job with a title of nobody and a salary that required him to show up. My associate owes me more than one favor, spanning more than 1 decade. He asked no questions. Derek started 3 weeks later driving a delivery route. I know this because I drove past his route one morning not to check on him, or maybe a little to check on him, and I saw his car. A 10-year-old Honda he had bought with the last of what he had, double parked outside a loading dock. I saw him coming out of the building with a hand truck, moving fast, focused. He had rolled his sleeves up. He looked like his grandfather. I kept driving. I did not stop, but I smiled the entire way home, and by the time I pulled into my driveway, the cracked side mirror was catching the morning light in a way that made even that look like something. Derek called me on a Sunday, about 6 weeks after he started the job, not to ask for anything. He called to tell me he had gotten his first paycheck and that it was the first money he had ever earned that felt like it was actually his. He said it quietly, like it was something he was still getting used to saying. I told him I was proud of him. He said he was sorry. Not a long speech. Not an explanation. Just, "I'm sorry, Dad. I was wrong. And I'm sorry." I told him I knew. I told him I loved him. I told him to get some sleep, because early mornings on a delivery route will take everything you have if you let them. He laughed. It sounded like the old laugh, the real one, from when he was a kid. We talked for 22 minutes about nothing important. The weather, a basketball game, a restaurant he had found near his new apartment, a smaller place he was renting with a roommate and paying for himself. He said the roommate was messy, but not terrible. I told him that was about as good as it gets with roommates. He laughed again. When we hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a while with my coffee going cold and the afternoon light coming through the window. And I thought about his mother, and about the oak tree in the backyard, and about a 7-year-old boy following me around with a toy hammer. I thought about what it takes to build something real, how you cannot do it for someone else, how sometimes the most important thing a father can give his son is not a safety net, but the experience of falling and discovering that the ground is survivable, and that you are stronger than you believed, and that you were capable of the climb back up all along. I got up and washed my coffee mug. I set it on the drying rack. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had actually done my job.